Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, welcome to this PocketGamer.biz RoundTable, sponsored by the good people at AdInMo. And this afternoon, we're going to be exploring what the winning monetization mix is going to look like in 2022. The mobile sector seems to evolve ever more rapidly. We've gone from the retail model to free-to-play through to wherever we are right now, and things continue to change. We are very, very lucky to welcome a hugely experienced and incredibly expert panel of guests this afternoon. And before we go any further, I would like everybody to go around and introduce themselves, if that's okay, just so the wonderful ladies and gentlemen, people of the internet, know who it is that they're actually hearing from. So I'm going to go around clockwise from where I'm sitting. So Kristen, can we come to you first? Who are you? What do you do? Who is it that you do it for?
Sure thing. Thanks, Brian, and thanks to the whole Pocket Gamer team for hosting this. My name is Kristen Rippers. I'm a co-founder and CEO of AdInMo. We're a non-interruptive, click-free, in-game play advertising platform, monetization SDK that basically connects advertisers to the hard-to-reach audiences via the medium of games.
Perfect. What a lovely, succinct summary. Joanne has trained you well. And moving on, Alex, can we hear from you next, please?
Sure thing. So I'm Alex. I'm the product manager for the Yodel One Mass SDK. Yodel One is also an ad monetization company, but our ads are the standard kind, the kind that pops up or is a banner in the screen. And we're very excited to be here with AdInMo and all the others to talk about the future of monetization. Excited.
Wonderful. That's great to hear, Alex. Thank you very much. And we've just been writing about Yodel One earlier this week, so I have some very, very interesting questions for you. Anton, can we hear from you next, please?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Really glad to join the roundtable. I'm Anton. I'm with Say Games. Say Games is a leading mobile games publisher. We primarily launch games based on ad monetization. So we're known for really big hits with ad monetization. Primarily is our key revenue driver. I work on the developer partnerships. So I recruit and retain new and existing teams, as well as help them produce and
launch
their titles globally.
Wonderful, thank you. And Tianyi.
Hey, nice to meet you all here. I'm Tianyi, and I'm from Newzoo. So Newzoo is a market analytics firm specialized in games and esports, and I'm the market lead of mobile at Newzoo. So yeah, Newzoo is most famous for all the grain graphs and the bar charts, but we're also doing consumer studies, consumer insights in 33 key markets across the globe. So we understand, the games market from the consumer side, as well as from development and publishing side. So nice to meet you all.
Wonderful, thank you, Tianyi. And last but not least, Mikhail.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mikhail. I'm ad monetization lead in Pixel Federation, and the Pixel Federation is a game developer based in Slovakia and one of the biggest in the region. So,
wonderful, lovely. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. This is one of these topics that I think can often be vastly misunderstood, and there's such a range of understanding when it comes to monetizing games, especially in the mobile market, because if you're a dinosaur like I am in the olden days, before you played a game, you had to go and buy it in a shop or a store. And that's clearly so far in the past that it's almost embarrassing. So let's kind of establish a baseline. Where are we right now in terms of monetization? What models is it that your company uses at the moment? What's kind of standard? And then let's start looking forward from there. So I'm going to come to you first, Alex, if I may.
Sure. So we have two divisions in Yodel One. We have our publishing division, which is where we started, and now we have our ad monetization SDK, which is used by thousands of publishers around the world. Both of those use the kind of standard three mobile ad formats that we've all come to know and love or hate, banners, interstitials, and rewarded videos, right? Beyond this, we do have a fair bit of IAPs in our published games, but I think most of our developers around the world are using those ad types in order to monetize. So yeah.
Fantastic. And strangely enough, we were just doing a piece about some of the brands and games that I know that you guys have been up to, but we're going to come back to that. Tianyi, could we hear from you, please?
Yeah, so Newzoo, we are not really a game development company, and then we do market research and market studies of the games industry. And what we've seen in the past years in the mobile games business is actually like the whole industry is really switching from a single monetization revenue stream to a multiple, or what we call hybrid monetization strategy that a lot of companies are adopting, both IAA and IAP. And also on the IAP side, previously was more purely just in-game purchases, but now we are also seeing a lot more like subscription based services or ads, in-game spendings, and battle passes, which are adopted almost in every game now.
Fabulous, thank you. Mikhail.
Yeah, basically, Pixel started as free to play, and basically we were aiming for in-app purchases mostly, but we kind of switched the trend, and we introduced ad monetization. So, and currently we are using the rewarded video, offer walls, and rewarded surveys as well.
Interesting. And rewarded surveys is something that's a twist on a classic, but it seems to be gaining in popularity. And Anton, how about yourselves?
So we've started as purely ad monetization company, developer and publisher, and that has been our primary success over the last couple of years. And for the last several months, we've seen releases with hybrid monetization, as is known, and we have a few so-called in-app heavy games. So as we're growing, we're progressing to more ways to monetize the audience that plays our games. So we've started with solely ads, interstitials, rewarded videos, and banners, and now we've introduced in-app purchases within our products, as well as in-play ads, which is something new on the market. So.
Wonderful, thank you. And Mr. Rivers, you're out there talking to developers, publishers all the time. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, it's interesting. For us, anyways, we're very narrow focus within this space. We do one type of monetization, unlike Yoda One, who have multiple types, and Anton's company and Mikhail's company, Pixel Federation, who use lots of different types of monetization. We just do the click-free in-game advertising. But I think it's this world that we're moving to of game publishers and developers experimenting with and using lots of different lots of different monetization types is really cool, and it's fantastic for us. I mean, as you said, Anton, you guys are experimenting with new monetization types yourselves, whether it's an app or ad. And that's opened up the door for AdInMo to have success in the space. And certainly, we think it's cool that developers are now experimenting and trying all these different ways to monetize. The Pocket Gamer survey that was released, I think, about a month ago now, mentioned that about a third of all game developers surveyed were looking at in-game gameplay ads as the next type of monetization they'll integrate in the next 6 months. More than any other type of ad monetization or any type of monetization. And like I said, I think 2 years ago we wouldn't, if that survey was run with that same question, we wouldn't have had that answer, right? So I think the world that we're in now is really cool, and I love to see all these different types of monetization being experimented with, tried, and hopefully being successful.
Now, that's a really interesting point, Kristen, and I was going to bring up the survey myself. So thank you. That's
sorry.
No. It's good. Because something that you've several of you have mentioned is this notion of hybrid monetization. Now, to me, that sounds as though it should mean you can have multiple monetization types within a game. Is that where we're going here? Anton, I can see you. Sorry, Alex, I can see you nodding vigorously.
Yeah. So I think hybrid monetization, from what we've seen, is any combination of any two or more different types of monetization. So it could just be as simple as IAP and standard ad monetization. It could be a combination of non-interruptive and standard interruptive ads. I think that we definitely see that this is a growing trend, and I'm excited to talk more about where the potential lies for those different types of monetization to intersect, because that's the really cool thing about where we're going as an industry.
Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense. Mikhail, you were, sorry, Anton's just put his hand up. I'll come to you next. Mikhail, is this where Pixel Federation is going as well? Are you introducing new revenue streams?
Yeah, we're definitely trying. So yeah, I think that the big topic for us for the next for this year and for the next is segmentation. So trying to find the different approaches for the different region, different categories, and different segments of your users, because they are like not coherent. So you are kind of need to approach them separately and with the different strategies and with the different formats and different ad formats as well.
Fantastic. And Anton, same thing. Is this pick and mix approach proving viable?
Yeah. So what I wanted to say is the way that we look at ads is you can monetize your entire audience with ads, and only a small fraction of your audience will actually make an in-app purchase. So that's what makes it different when you're thinking about how you design your product and what's your marketing strategy going to be for the product you're building, and also it really depends on how you define a hybrid monetization. For example, interstitial ads and the rewarded ad, they might look almost the same because one is skippable, another is unskippable, and you have to watch till the end of the video. But they're very different from the game design and product point of view, because interstitial ad is something that interrupts the gameplay, and it's like you're watching a TV and then there is an ad on the TV that you can't skip, right? Yeah. You'll have to sit through the ad to move on with your program that you're watching. But the rewarded ad, you will have to actually iterate with yourself. So you as a player, you're making a decision to actually watch an ad to get something in exchange from the game. So that involves different game design tactics. That involves a deeper meta around the core gameplay that you're building within your game, etc., etc. And when it comes to in-app purchases, that goes even beyond when interstitials and rewarded ads. In order for a player to make a purchase, that means a player must be willing not only to invest their time into the game, but also their money. So the approach is completely different. And what we're seeing is the actual hybrid monetization approach is the winning one when you combine in-app purchases, for example, with rewarded ads, and make sure that the entire audience can iterate with the game and invest something in the game and get something in exchange. And the new things like in-play ads, there's something completely new when you have a completely non-intrusive ad experience where you're seeing a brand, a banner within the game world, and you don't have to invest anything to actually iterate or just see the ad in the game. So that's a new approach that we're seeing.
Now, you see, that's absolutely fascinating. And I want to come back to the point that you made about game design, because I think this is an incredibly important one. Before we leave this question, Tianyi, from your position, you know, it's you guys are sort of, as you said, kind of getting an overview of the industry. What are you seeing out there? Are you seeing it's like companies willing to explore and experiment a little more?
Yeah, for sure. I think over the past few years, like, as I already mentioned, this is really like an uptaking trend in the industry that a lot of companies are trying to adopt this hybrid monetization. And also, as Anton mentioned, it's actually, you know, it's striking a balance between time and the money. Like sometimes, you know, consumers, they spend time on ads, and that can be converted into a currency. So we've also seen like more and more companies or games are actually taking ads as a new currency in the game. So there are like items or weapons or, you know, skins that are only accessible or exchangeable by watching ads. So we've like really seen the trend of like ads becoming, you know, a currency in the game. So I think this is really like a recent innovation in the industry.
That's, again, I'm finding this absolutely fascinating, because it brings us into the topic of personalization, but personalization from the player's point of view, because back in the ancient past, you had one model and everyone had to take it or leave it. You either bought the game or you didn't. So are we now looking at an era where the player can personalize their experience? They can pick and choose a little more, and developers can realize value from players in different ways. So in-app purchases for those who want to give you money directly, incentivized reward ads, interstitials, etc., for those who maybe aren't as cash rich but who are willing to invest more of their time. So is this allowing developers and publishers to cater for a broader audience? And I'm going to come to you first, Anton, if I may.
Absolutely. And the more focused you're on in-app purchases, the narrower your audience is going to be. So which means that your marketing strategy is going to be completely different from the broad marketing strategy that you have in ads, in most of the ad monetization-based games. And what we're seeing currently in the industry is that there are very popular games that have the design structure based around ad monetization, and especially rewarded monetization, where game designers actually create systems that make players interact with certain elements in the game, where you are required to do something in the game that will later launch the rewarded ads. And it actually becomes an integral part of the actual core experience, where, for example, you have a character running around a game world, and in order to convert your gold to I don't know, wood or vice versa, you will have to do something with the little thing that does the conversion, and to speed up the process, you will absolutely use a rewarded ad, and that and that really becomes the in-game kind of experience and the currency. So the games now are really designed around the types of the monetization that drive those games from the revenue point of view.
I see. Okay, yeah, that makes a huge amount of sense, and again, this opens things up, and I want to come back to that issue of design and development, as I say, slightly later. Mikhail, Pixel Federation, is this again where you are heading? Is it empowering players, improving accessibility?
Basically, there was like really good answers from Tianyi and from Anton as well. So I think that it's definitely something that is a trend, and using the ad monetization and the ads as a currency is like something that we are definitely on. And it's, for us, it's not only about like player to have like that he's able to decide if he will pay or not, or he will kind of pay us with ads. It's about like gaining some sort of advantage for him. So he's like on it, like he will decide he will either pay us or either pay us and watch some ads. So it's like we do have this approach that it's allowed for all players, like payers and non-payers, and they are like having the huge advantage from ads, even if they are like paying users.
I beg your pardon. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because we're asking, right, what's the direction and will players have more experience? But I think it depends a lot on where the developer's from and where their players are from, whether or not this is really the direction that we're going to go. So for example, I work with a lot of developers from Pakistan, Southeast Asia. Their players are also from that region. Economically, it makes sense to focus only on ad monetization because that's going to be the easiest thing for them to build and also for their players to access. They may not have the resources to invest in IP or subscription. They may not have the bandwidth for different ad types. They may need something simple, right? And I think as we look at the rest of the world kind of playing catch up with those who have been developing for longer, what we're seeing is that it's kind of more standard banners, interstitials, easy to use, easy to access on a low bandwidth connection are still the things that are making the most sense for these kind of developers. Developers who have more resources or more time, perhaps they have more experience, they may be experimenting towards giving players multiple choices with their ad monetization experience. But yeah, it really depends on the region and the type of players you're going after. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how we as an industry identify, hey, this person or this developer, it makes sense for them to move into a broader ad monetization strategy that includes different types of monetization. It makes sense for their players, right? It's going to vary a lot.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to come to you in a second, Chris. And I just want to follow up on one topic there, which is it possible, therefore, to have developers and publishers monetizing the same game differently based on region and based on audience? Or is that not something that we're seeing out there? And I open this up to anyone.
Oh, yeah. I'll let somebody else take this first.
Okay. Tianyi, is that something you can maybe shed some light on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't say it's like a common strategy in the market now, but I do see this, becoming more and more common in the future, especially if publishers are talking about their global strategy, and then it's global, but then localization actually plays a very important role in the globalization or strategy. Like we actually did a research not too long ago, and we found actually among the top grossing. Sorry, I have to apologize to the lights because it's motion control that I have to keep moving.
That's okay. You're the only one being eco-friendly here, so
yes, the news is becoming really green. So, and then back to the topic. So we did a study a couple of months ago, and then we found actually among the top grossing games in the US compared to China. So among the top 200 games in the US, around 60% actually adopt hybrid monetization. And in China, it's only around 30%. So we are seeing the similar pattern in Japan, China and Japan with very high ARPU games. So publishers try to retain their gamers in the portfolio, and that they don't want to show ads to their super valuable consumers. So on that side, a lot of Japanese and Chinese games are actually using brand activation or brand injection to monetize their players or non-paying players. Mm-hmm. But then for less or lower ARPU countries, like even in the West, like the US and Europe, like hybrid monetization, especially IA, is more common than in China or Japan.
That's fantastic. Thank you. That really, really great insight. And Kristen, you know, to go back to the topic of personalization, but do feel free to dip into the regionalization as well. I mean, you guys are. It's almost designed specifically to enhance the player experience. It's with
it's tough for me to add much to what Anton and Alex in particular had said. And I think something that you said, Alex, resonated with me. But just taking that step back real quick, before the call, before the start of Tianyi and Mikhail and I were talking about audiobooks and audiobooks we listen to. And some of you may know I worked for Paramount Pictures for a number of years in Asia, leading the digital distribution team out there. And I think gaming is unique. And we need to keep that in mind. Gaming is unique, unlike any other form of digital entertainment, where personalization is kind of built into the game experience. And whether that's, the typical examples of GTA 5 and, be able to change the radio in your car, or any kind of sports game where you get to change the look of your team, the jerseys that the avatars are wearing, et cetera. And so I think that that rewarded nature is something we should be embracing. Sorry, that personalized nature is something we should be embracing more. And rewarded probably was kind of version 1.0 of that. And this is kind of the push and pull of this, where the pull is allowing the players, and this is where I think what really resonated to me, Alex, what you said, we're allowing the players to have some control over their game experience. They can choose, do they want to watch a rewarded video or not? And then I guess the push side of this, of course, is the flexibility and freedoms that all these different monetization types allow game developers to experiment with as well. So that's the other side of giving, rather than personalization, maybe kind of think about it from a control perspective and giving more control both to the players and to the game developers as to opening up that game experience.
And we're going to come back to that, because I think there's a really big discussion point around the whole design development process and where this fits in. But just very quickly before we move on, two additional areas of potential revenue. One is data, in terms of accessing, using, harvesting, the use of data, players' data with third parties. Given a lot of the changes in legislation that we've seen in the app stores, do any of the panel feel that this is a viable ongoing revenue stream, or do you think it's going to be locked down ever more tightly? I'm just throwing that out to anyone who wants to pick that one up.
I can pick that up.
Yes, please. The silence was just deafening.
Yeah. So basically, as I mentioned, we are using the rewarded survey. So basically, we are kind of selling our users' data to a third party. And basically it's working, and it's working. From my perspective, you need to figure out it and A/B test it definitely, but it's viable, because, as you know, the offer wall on iOS is not working at all, basically. So yeah, surveys are definitely, for some countries, are a viable option.
Thank you, Mikhail. And this next one, just again, very briefly, I guess for you, Alex, and it's only because we actually did a piece about Yoda One a couple of days ago, and about some of the brands in games. Specifically, you recently dropped Transformers into one of the big games, I believe, in China. And so is in-game product placement, branding, is this something that the majority of developers and publishers can look for, or is this reserved for the top tier, the AAA, if you will?
Right now, I think it's reserved for larger developers, for sure. I think that in order to do brand injection, you have to ask yourself an important question. Is your audience big enough for you to make this investment? Do you have enough recurring revenue? Is it going to resonate with that audience? Sometimes what we see is that with these smaller indie developers, the very thing that draws players to their game is actually that there's something new, something different, right? And I think that adding a brand to your game, if you're not even, you don't have the audience to support it, or you don't have, you have something unique about your game, actually might dilute the experience or make it more challenging for you to develop your own unique voice. So that's my take on it at the moment. We'll see as the time evolves. And there might also be interesting opportunities for us to pick indie brands, right? Smaller brands that have a rabid fan base, and then start injecting those into other indie brands and seeing a whole new way of brands and games playing out, not just these large names that we all know globally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tianyi, just very briefly again, from Newzoo's perspective, are you seeing more interest, more engagement from brands and marketing agencies, or are they still keeping games at arm's length?
Well, definitely a lot more interest over the past few years. I think most mainstream brands were looking at esports, but now that the interest is really coming to games and mobile games, particularly because mobile gaming has very wide audience reach with the diverse demographics. So it's really, of course, it's still at very early stage, and a lot of brands, they still kind of trust traditional marketing. So there's still lots, education or stuff to do in the market for them to get involved, but definitely lots of interest. And then you've seen some unbelievable collaborations between luxury brands and the shooter games. You never thought about it before, but the collaboration went pretty well. So very interesting space to explore for sure.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, I want to actually move on to a topic that has been mentioned several times, which is design and development. And Kristen, you made the point just a couple of minutes ago very, very clearly, which is about giving developers more control over the monetization issues. Now, obviously, you've worked in game development publishing in the past. So is this, are we at the point now where developers can be an awful lot more picky? Can this be far more of a design issue rather than we've got to make money somehow, let's just throw in the usual revenue streams?
Yeah, and I'm going to cheat and go back to the previous question real quickly, because I thought that was an interesting comment there, which shows we all have different views on the world here. And this is the awesome thing about how huge mobile gaming has become. Many of us can remember, and some of us still do, these very highly integrated brand and game integrations, where it's a branded game, basically. And that's one end of the scale. I think the brand injections that Yoda One do are really cool. And as you said, Alex, they require a certain amount of scale. Tinyi, what you were saying about brands looking at this space now is very true. And I think where our vision for AdInMo is to kind of democratize some of that brand and game interaction, so that in theory any brand could have interactions with game players, and any game, whether it's, as you said, Alex, whether it's an indie game all the way up to a super AAA title, can have access to monetization through branding. So that's I think that's where we see the world. But this is, I think, like I said, it's the awesome thing about the space we're in, is all of these are probably accurate and have validity. To the game design part of it then, and that kind of leads into how we look at game design from our perspective. The AdInMo in gameplay ad units we've erred on the side of trying to make them fairly, generic's the wrong word, but utilizable in lots of different game styles, game types, as opposed to, say, a very bespoke brand integration. And there's this ongoing tension, which I think Anton and Mikhail in particular can talk to, all the between the product team and the design team in publishers and developers. And it's a tension that always exists, and quite rightfully so. The monetization team and the monetization team and the product team, and this tension is absolutely required to create both a good game and a game that makes money. And I think where we see this starting to open up a bit for the world that we touch within game advertising is, many of the games that we work with today oftentimes have already been out there. Their soft launch, their games are live, and we work with the monetization managers to layer on these in-game advertising. What's really cool is we're starting with our own in-house game design team to talk to developers and publishers during the GDD phase, and actually talk to the product team and design teams, and figure out how to make these non-interruptive ad units part of the experience from the start and inherent to the experience as opposed to something that's layered on, which is oftentimes the way that video ads have been layered on, right? We'll stick those in at natural kind of breakpoints. And that kind of fits into, again, hopefully not stealing your thunder on this one, Brian, referring back to another one of the Pocket Gamer stats from the survey was, I think it was around about 40% of all devs felt that, of all developers felt that the ad units that didn't break game immersion was the most critical design requirement for them. And so I guess you could argue that banner ads to some degree don't really break immersion, just sit at the bottom or the top. And so as long as you don't click on it, then it's you're not breaking the immersion. That's the I think this is where we get excited now, is to say, okay, let's get into that earlier phase and work with the game designers to build games around these new types of monetization, as opposed to, again, just stacking it on top of an existing game type.
Now, I think there's a couple of very, very interesting points there. And again, thank you. So I was going to bring up the developer survey and the fact that developers are looking for that non-intrusive kind of experience and keeping the consistent experience for the player. But how do we balance this tension? Because Anton, Michael, for you guys specifically, is it now possible for game designers and developers to create an entire game, a commercially successful game, or do the business team need to be involved? Should the business team be involved? And at what point should they get involved? So I'll come to you first, Michael, if I may.
Absolutely. Well, I think that from my perspective, it's definitely good to have like this ongoing conversation between like product and monetization, and from the early stage and as early as possible, because both of us are on the different fields of expertise, and I think it's really important to educate the game designers about like new types of ads, new types of revenue stream that could be used, and just to educate them at some level, that they will be like, when they will be creating that game and thinking about that, they do have this knowledge. And I think that game designers are the best in terms of creating those sweet spots where the ad or ad format and specific ad format or some sort of monetization will work really, really best in their game, basically.
I beg your pardon. Alex, I see you've got your hand up. I'm going to come to you in a second, but Anton, can we hear from you first?
Sure. So as I said before, monetization is always a design factor. Mm-hmm. So you have to create the game thinking about how people are going to interact with them and how they're going to invest their time or money into the game to progress over time, to come back to the game, etc., etc., etc. And talking about the business and the design, so we as a publisher, we act as the business side of things, and we also act as a producer side of things. So we always coach our developers on how to think about ad monetization specifically, and what are the key success factors here in terms of how to mix interstitial ads and rewarded ads, what kind of products we're expecting if we're talking about rewarded ad-based games only with no interstitial intrusion. Now we're starting to introduce in-play ads as an additional way to monetize the existing audience without actually interrupting the gameplay. So now our teams are actually aware of this monetization method, and they start thinking about their games from a different perspective now. So we actually have a couple of products that have just started working on their new games, thinking about, this is how we're gonna have this banner in the game. So we're gonna see these brands with a certain technology used, for example, with AdInMo in particular. So yeah, we think about design and monetization in parallel. We never think about designing the game and then figuring out how we're going to monetize it.
Yeah, and to me that makes perfect sense. But again, to go back to our developer survey, that there seem to be an awful lot of studios out there, presumably at sort of the lower end of the market, who are operating on very slim, if any, budgets, and it still seems to be very much about making the game. If we make it as good as we possibly can, then we're golden. But I'm going to come back to that in a second. Alex, you had your hand up. So what were you about to say?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Speaking of that part of the survey and also that part of the market, I think that one of the things that's implicit bias in this question is that there are product teams or monetization teams with some of these developers, right? I mean, I speak with developers every day who are individuals or perhaps 1-2 people. There's no team, right? And for them, game design is important, but what's also really important is making a living and surviving, right? So end of day, I think that a lot of times what you see in this part of the market is that, hey, what's going to work, right? What's going to get us enough budget to build our next 2, 3, 4 games? And then honestly, there's also a segment of the market that doesn't really care. I mean, it's very interesting, right? You look at South and Southeast Asia, you have some developers that will literally scrape the web and they'll look at the top games on the App Store or the Play Store. And their goal is to just copy as many of those games as possible. We affectionately call these guys Corey the copiers, right? They exist for the purpose of trying to make a living and then perhaps spread that to their communities and hire developers in order to bring more people up economically. And so for them, it's a very low priority to say, hey, I want to focus on game design. The priority is I want to make money, right? And I want to make money with as many game properties as possible. So I think when we talk about this, it's important to remember that the bottom of the market needs to survive first and then thrive. Whereas perhaps some of the developers who are in the survey on the higher end, they're able to experiment with this and even have the concept of game design. My favorite thing is to find someone who's never, ever even gone to game design school or anything and just happen to pick up Cordova or Unity and play around with it and then manage to strike gold, because that's where things are really cool in the market. But for those guys, thinking about anything other than surviving is usually a bit tricky, right? And that's the market that we see as growing and developing fastest in the next couple of years.
Interesting. Hyun-Yi, you were nodding along there. Is this something that you're getting a kind of a perspective on from Newzoo?
No, I just found out what Alex has said is really super interesting, like about these emerging markets, etc. So yeah, I don't really have something to add on, but I just found it really interesting, and I do see that trend as well, because I come from China, and I saw this in China a couple of years ago, was exactly the same, and now China is more like a matured mobile gaming market, and the trend is expanding to other emerging markets.
Fantastic. That's Anton. Yes, you want to jump in?
No, I just wanted to add something that I totally agree with Alex with what he said, and we're experts in ad monetization, in particular a business model called hyper casual. So this is how we became successful as a company, as a publisher, by launching ad-based games with, as Alex said, smaller teams, right? So we do have teams that we work with from Southeast Asia, for example. We have a team from Bangladesh, and there are lots of those smaller teams who thrive just because the ad monetization exists. So when the market became mature enough, and there were enough games and the audience that were playing those games on the one hand. On the other hand, there were enough companies that would invest their marketing money into in-game interstitial rewarded ads or any kind of ads. So that created a whole ecosystem, or a whole new market potential worth of billions of dollars, where smaller teams became prominent game developers. So you don't need to have a hundred team of people to create a AAA in-app based products over several years and with millions of dollars of budgets. Now you can create a simple enough hyper casual game with a simple core mechanic that is sticky enough for you to have a positive ROI on your marketing spend. And since the game is tailored for the broadest possible audience, so for it's any hyper casual game is built for the wide audience with no separation between gender or age or even geographical. So all the games are global and tailored for the widest possible audience. So that created an opportunity for lots of smaller teams out there to actually create very successful games and become very successful.
That's fantastic, Anton, and a very good point, very well made. Now, I'm conscious that time is marching on, so I'm going to keep us moving forward. So to pick up on the point that we've just been discussing, is it possible to change your monetization mix? Is it possible to introduce new monetization methods after launch? I mean, Kristen, obviously you can, the non-interruptive stuff, yes, I'm assuming works flawlessly. But is it possible to combine other models and mix and match once people are actually playing it? And this is open to anybody in the panel who would like to pick it up.
Yeah, I'll start, but I think I do think the Anton, Alex, and Mikhail probably have more valid input on this. As I said, we work with a number of game developers. I think that was also, Alex, what you mentioned, and Anton, you picked up on. The thing we have to keep in mind is there is this, when we talk about game developers, that's a variety, right? It is from one person in the garage to a team of 100 plus, and we work with a number of them that add in monetization after the fact, add in game, in gameplay, AdInMo style monetization after the fact. So it's absolutely doable. And I think some games lend themselves, some game styles lend themselves more to that than others. And as I said, really, I think where our vision is to get earlier in that process. But you can certainly, from our experience, anyways, we've seen game developers quite successfully add in gameplay monetization to existing live games and seeing incremental, non-cannibalizing revenue as an outcome of that. This is certainly our dream as AdInMo, and apologies on this for you, Alex. Our dream is, of course, to eventually get rid of all those video ads and banner ads. But the reality is they exist, and they will continue to exist, and rewarded video, and there's a good reason for these, and rewarded surveys, there's a good reason for them to exist in the right game styles. But be able to easily, and I think that's the critical part of this, is how easy do you make it as a monetization platform from our perspective to do that is going to be critical to that adoption.
Fantastic, Kristen. Thank you very much. I'm throwing this open to the rest of the panel. Would anyone else like to jump in on this before we march swiftly onwards?
Maybe I can add something.
Basically,
we did basically this. So with, for example, Diggy's Adventure, when we launched it on mobile, it was like strictly in-app purchase oriented, and then we slightly step by step, carefully and A/B testing, we added ad monetization to it, and now the ads are doing somewhere around 35% of the revenue of it. So it was something that it's definitely possible, and you just need to take like step by step and absolutely bring some value to the player, and they will be happy to jump on ad monetization as well.
Fantastic, Mikhail. Thank you. And I'm going to keep us moving on again. So one question I would like to ask, which I'm sure is relevant to pretty much everyone out in the audience, is how do we measure success in a monetization mix? Is it lifetime value? Is it ARPU? Is it ARPDAU? What is it that we should be looking for? Is it great reviews, customer satisfaction, one sum, or all of the above? Okay, I'm going to pick on somebody. Anton, yeah, let's come to you first.
Yeah, success is measured by profits. So and there are lots of factors that make a game profitable or not profitable, right? So and talking about the actual product metrics, it's also a combination of factors such as stickiness. What's your retention? What's your LTV? If we're talking about LTV, we are talking about monetization, obviously, and how exactly you're going to monetize your audience. How big of a game this is in terms of how much content there is in the game. Will players stick around for enough time to actually for you to change the LTV curve in order to extend the time period on where you're actually going to reach the flattened curve in terms of your added ARPU for the average user. And what we're seeing is every game is different, and it's very, as I said before, it's very, very important to think about how exactly you're going to monetize and what kind of game or product you're building from the monetization point of view. And then it's very important to A/B test and iterate during all the different stages of the game development. And for example, we've seen various examples of how different monetization methods work together or how they contradict one another. For example, interstitial ads will hurt your in-app monetization. So the paying audience will absolutely leave your game if you're going to bombard them with the interstitial ads. Okay, so and on the other hand, you can add other monetization methods for the entire audience that plays the game, not only the paying audience, and that is the rewarded ads, that is the in-play ads, and other specific types of monetization that is specific for your actual product.
Now that's interesting. So can I ask, and again, this is open to anyone, are there particular monetization types that simply don't work with particular genres? Yeah, Anton, please.
Particular genres. I don't think there are genres that don't work with ads. I just think there are user acquisition strategies that may not necessarily work with ads as a monetization method, because if we're talking about ads, and ads will most likely affect your key product metrics. And ads in general, intrusive ads, they don't help your retention. And when we're talking about user acquisition for some prominent genres such as match 3, for example, we're talking about very high user acquisition costs that a big publisher may not necessarily recoup within a year of operating a game for a particular cohort of users acquired on a day X, for example. So for them, it's going to be very dangerous to introduce any monetization type that is going to be intrusive and will churn the user base. So their job is to keep the active user base for as long as possible, so they actually can recoup those costs with the in-app spend. So the point is you have to think about all the things altogether, including your UA strategy, when thinking about what monetization types you're going to adopt within your product.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Anton. And Alex, you had your hand up briefly, or was it a wave?
No, that was to get your attention. So thanks for that. Yeah, I was thinking about this question, definitions of success, before this call. And I would say that it's very interesting because for as many developers as there are out there in the world, there are different variations on the definition of success, right? I mentioned earlier this idea that there's developers out there, we call them core and copiers, who they just copy games. For them, it's revenue, no doubt. And to be honest with you, it's not even, they don't even look too deep into the metrics. They're interested in eCPMs. So seeing a high eCPM translates to success because they know they'll be able to monetize their volume of games. However, for some developers, it's not just about money. Everybody loves money. It's important, right? Mm-hmm. But for some developers, it's about acclaim. It's about being the most loved game or the game that everybody comments on Reddit as being a great experience overall. There's one developer in particular we're working with right now for whom that's been extremely important, more so than maximizing his own revenue. For others, it's about getting published and then getting your name out there. So that's similar to acclaim, but certainly getting that guidance to grow in the industry. So I think success really varies. And that's what's cool too, is that when we think about these different monetization strategies, naturally over time, certain types of developers will gravitate towards certain types of ad monetization strategies, even at the very low end of the market, depending on how they define success. So I think we have a great case where we've worked with AdInMo, with one of our developers, Volcron from Canada, right? These are two guys who started their game studio out of college. And I think from talking with them, their definition of success was certainly to make a living, but also to make a great player experience. And for them, in-game non-intrusive ads with AdInMo were a perfect fit, right? They started with Yoda 1 and then grew to a point where that made sense logically. So yeah, Brian, I think you're speaking and you're on mute though.
That's okay. I have a small child in the background who's just found a whistle. So, you know, it wasn't directed at you, Alex.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but that's what I would say, right? Is that definitions of success also drive adoption of different monetization strategies. And that's where we see in the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of this collaboration across different monetization processes happening, right? And why so a company like Yoda 1 and AdInMo actually can make a great team.
Ooh, a hand across the ocean, Mr. Rivers. I hope you're listening.
I like to hear that.
Now, we're down to the last few minutes, folks, and we've got 3 questions coming in from the audience that I want to throw into this mix. I think quite a few of them are focused more or less on you, Tristan. So the adoption of non-intrusive ad formats, how is it going?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's doing awesome, right? This is why we're here talking to you. In fact, we have between the panelists here, we have games live with some of the panelists here, even as Alex mentioned. So yeah, as I said at the start, it's we're super pleased. I think it's the time has come together through both the brand's interest in gaming, game developers and publishers' interest in trying new monetization formats, the devices, the device part of this as well. They're powerful enough and have been for the last few years that we can now put animated ads into a 3D game environment without in general impacting the performance of the game with the AdInMo SDK. So yeah, we're certainly pleased with it. We see lots of runway for us, and we certainly hope that this is a positive for the game industry as well.
Fabulous. Okay, 2 more quick questions from the panel. So how are the fill rates in tier 3 regions like Brazil for non-intrusive ad formats? Again, I guess this is yours, Kristen, maybe you too.
I'll start with this, but Alex or somebody else may have some comments here as well. And Anton, Say Games have already put AdInMo into one of their games, so may have some comments too. I think what we see is to Alex's comment earlier, CPMs are lower in tier 3 countries, as you would expect, just following advertising in general. But we spent a lot of effort ensuring our SDK, as I think I mentioned earlier, that it works really well on low-end devices. So we wind up having a lot of games live in tier 3 markets, and we wind up getting a lot of traffic in those markets too. So we wind up monetizing well in those places. So certainly happy something to take offline. I don't want to get too salesy here, but it's we think that's one of the nice things about the in-game advertising, the in-game play ads, is they do work in tier 3 markets as well.
Fantastic. And the final one from the audience that we have had in, and I'm going to throw this open to everyone, but I think given the time, thumbs up and thumbs down. What are the panel's thoughts on non-intrusive audio ads in-game? Big yes? Bit of a maybe? Or is it something that you are going to be exploring?
Right. Excellent. I'll jump in here, and I see Alex about to say something as well. It's not a thumbs up or a thumbs down for me. I'm really pleased to see lots of other non-intrusive style of ads. We have video ads, which is basically audio plus video. I don't think it's a yes or no. Like in gameplay, like any type of advertising, it needs to match to the game. That would be my view on it, and in some ways, it can match really well.
Fabulous. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground this afternoon, and just before we wrap up, we've talked about non-intrusive ads. We've talked about rewarded surveys, rewarded video, interstitial video, banners, etc. What is out there on the horizon? Where are we now seeing new monetization and revenue streams coming in? What should people be looking out for over the rest of 2021 and indeed into 2022? Alex, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think that perhaps we will see an increase in developers looking outside of their games themselves and into, alternative ways of monetizing their property as a brand, right? I earlier mentioned this idea that indie developers have their own brands, right? If you've got 1 million people playing your game around the world, you've got a brand and you've got characters that you can monetize. I think we will see an increase in interest in taking these online or in-game characters and in-game brands and turning them into offline, interactive merchandise or other properties that developers can use outside of the game space. And I'm very excited for this because I think it's a huge opportunity, not only for the developers, but also for the players to get deeper in the experience of the game themselves.
Perfect. I'm going to stop you there, Alex. Thank you. Mikhail.
Yeah. Basically, for us, for the next year, the biggest challenge and the thing that we definitely do work on harder and harder is like the segmentation. To kind of approach every single segment that we will be able to identify as viable for any kind of ad format and form of monetization, and try to squeeze it out.
Wonderful, thank you. Tianyi?
Yeah, I think for next year, like with the trend of metaverse or social games, I think brand activation is definitely a direction to look into. Because of social games, you need to have like real life brands injected in the game to make it real, etc., like connected to real life. So that's what we think is going to be another big hit in the market.
Wonderful, thank you, Anton.
For us, a mixed monetization approach is a key driver of growth at the moment, and we think that is going to be a very big part of what's driving the industry forward within the next year or two. It was for the last few years it was kind of separated, the in-app kind of business and ads business, ad monetization business, or kind of development, the product approach, the marketing approach. They were kind of very different. And now we're seeing that more and more in-app based products utilize ads, and more ad monetization publishers and developers start to utilize in-app purchases in their products. So it kind of gets all mixed together now, and market is becoming mature because of that.
That's fantastic, Anton. Thank you. And then the final word has to go to you, Mr. Rivers.
Thank you. So first of all, sorry, apologies. Tinya, you've got your light flashing off on your side. I've got my light flashing on mine. So between the two of us here, I really liked what you said, Alex, about branding, and every game has a brand now. I think Seriously and Rovio, have proven that as a game developer, as a game publisher, you can turn your IP into a world-renowned brand. And then the other side of that we would like as AdInMo to be a part of, looking forward to help game developers, is the other side of this, which is to bring the brands, other people's brands, into the games. And whether that's from the AdInMo side, or as you guys do at Yoda One, Alex, with brand injection, I think giving any game developer not just the opportunity to expose their brand out to the world, but also to have lots of brands come into world recognized brands come into their game is something that we're wanting to do.
Fantastic. We've got a plea from the audience. There's one question, which is there any minimum DAU requirements for non-intrusive ads? And he said, please, in caps, so he must really mean it.
The answer is no. Reach out to the AdInMo team separately, and we're happy to talk to you.
Perfect. And on that happy customer note, I think we must bring the events of this afternoon to a close. Thank you all so very, very much for joining us. Kristen, for putting all of this together, Tianyi, Mikhail, Alex, and Anton. It has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time. Some fantastic insight from all of you. As always, we barely scratch the surface before we have to move on. I think there's an entire event that we could be staging, an idea for the Steel Media team, around and about monetization and revenue streams, because it is changing so quickly and the options are so vast. It just remains for me to say thank you again. Please do check out the developer survey that Steel Media put together earlier this quarter. It's sponsored by AdInMo. It has a lot of insight from developers and publishers across the whole of the industry. It's very, very well worth a look, looking at everything from the types of game, the genres, the audiences, and of course, monetization. It's absolutely worth your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. It has been a real pleasure to chair you. Thank you for making it such an easy and fascinating panel. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you all again, if not online, then maybe in the real world at some point soon. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you again at some point shortly.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.